How about that? Oh, much better. This is why we practice, so Erin didn't have to do that. Okay, I think I saw lots of you checking out the mail table at McClurg. In case you didn't, please make sure to do that at breakfast. Two very important things. One is an address and email list, which we will distribute at the end. You can either pick up a hard copy or we'll email it to you, but please go by and check and make sure that your mailing address and email address are correct. You can just initial beside it, and if for some reason you don't want your mailing address or email address on there, cross it out. We'll take that message. Agent lists are also there. I think most of you have probably noticed, fiction writers, that the agent meetings are posted back here and also on the table at McClurg. Amy Williams' list will still be out through breakfast in the morning. And one final announcement, Miriam has lost her posing chair. It is a blue aluminum tripod fold-up chair.
It's an aluminum thing. It's called a camp stool, and it has a triangular blue.
Is somebody saying it's outside?
Really?
Outside the first store of St. Luke's. It's a great group. Okay, now for social announcements.
All right, one of these books.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah, if I can.
You think you can? Okay.
I'll read it.
Just
Adam Bright.
you have won this book. Well, we'll just take this one. Oh, that really hurt. Okay, how about Kelly Ford? Yeah! You pick a number. You never get to pick a number.
13.
The lucky number 13.
Cliff.
We have several social announcements for you social people. Tonight at Humphreys there's an open mic at 9:30, so just go over there. After this, there will be some beer. Yes, I see you and I agree, 5-minute limit for your reading. It will be really fun. Delicious beers, but also bring more because I only have a case of beer and you're going to drink more than that, so bring some more. 9:30. Tomorrow night, Thursday night, this has changed. Changed from Friday night. Tomorrow night, you don't have to wait. After the reading, after Claudia's reading, meet here with Andrew Hudgens. We're going to go on a graveyard tour and find Alan Tate's grave, which I just found today myself. Bring a flashlight if you have one, but we'll have some too. The reason we're moving it is because Friday night there is a new activity, movie night. This just happened. Yeah! So we're gonna gather in Gaylor Auditorium time, TBA, I guess after the reading, Megan? Yeah. After the reading, we'll gather in Gaylor Auditorium for apparently the world premiere of the new Cormac McCarthy movie Child of God. And this is thanks to Greg Barrios. I don't know where Greg is. But thank you, Greg, for making that happen. He knows Hollywood people. And
in my dorm, we're going to be watching Urban Cowboy.
It's going to be hard to decide what to do. I think that's it. So please welcome the awesome Erin McGraw. Stop that
right now. Robert Haas, you settle down. Thank you. My actual reading tonight will not be all that terribly long, but I got a bunch of opening material. And it starts with thanks. Wyatt, where are you? There you are. Thank you first. The reason that this conference has the gracious and warm feel that it does comes from that man. Thank you, of course, to the staff. Megan and Adam work all year long. The rest of the staff works all through the summer to make me look good. And I am very, very grateful. We've got two guests tonight who were members of the staff for a long time, are part of the conference lifeblood. Juliana Gray and Erica Dawson, I am so glad that you are here. Two more shout outs. One, Buzz Sinknick, his generosity and compassion has literally kept Andrew and me going this summer. I'm very... My co-teacher, Richard Bausch, not only is a brilliant writer and not only a very, very charming guy, but has a far higher pain tolerance than I do. The first thing that he did after getting his broken wrist bone set was go to Sterling's and have his conference. The man is a trooper. And one last one, and that is thank you. The other reason that this conference has the gracious and warm feeling that it does is because of you, and it wouldn't happen if you weren't here. We are really, really grateful. I am going to read from a new book, Newer Than Better Food. This is the same book I read from last year. It still doesn't have a title. If anybody has got a title at home that you're not using, please come and talk to me. This comes about 100 pages in, so we need a little bit of setup. Linda and Mitch are neighbors in a condominium. Linda is 37 years old and recently unexpectedly became a widow. Her husband died of an aneurysm about 4 months before the chapter I'm going to read. Mitch has a raging and unrequited crush on Linda. And Linda does not much care for Mitch, but she likes his dog quite a bit. Yeah, that's for you, Rufus. And she goes running with his dog. About 2 weeks before the chapter I'm going to read, Riley tangled with a porcupine. And Linda and Mitch were up until 1 in the morning extracting quills from his mouth and snout. And after that, very unwisely tumbled into bed together, something that made Mitch almost unexpressibly happy and that Linda was regretting before it was even done. So that has just happened. What else do I need to tell you? There is a brief reference to Easy and Elegant, which is the event planning company that Linda and her husband had run together when he was alive. And Mitch has recently taken in a roommate. He is a guy named Gary, who will show up latish in the chapter. Mitch is trying to help Gary get sober, an endeavor that is not going terribly well. Linda was guzzling water while Riley lay happy and exhausted across her kitchen floor, filling the air with the smell of warm fur, grass, and dirt. It was worth running with the dog just to get the smell. He was the best running partner she'd ever had. Even though they rarely got further than the next development, she was now running 6.5-minute miles. Ever since the night with the porcupine, she ran with his leash looped around her wrist, meaning that a few times he'd hauled her into brush when he took off after a rabbit, but they were getting used to each other. He was a good dog, better than Mitch realized. Her mind skated away from thinking about Mitch. Instead, she finished her water and sat on the floor next to Riley, picking up his heavy muzzle to examine it, her daily ritual. The morning after he bit the porcupine, Linda slipped out of bed early and almost fell over the dog, his long body slung across the bedroom floor and his breathing uneven and clotted. No surprise. During the night, his mouth and soft throat had swollen to twice their normal size, as if he had half swallowed a soccer ball. Linda tried to waken Riley softly with a hand to his head. "Come on, boy," she murmured. "Come on downstairs where I can look at you. Shh, now. Can you get up? Come on." Whispering and murmuring and coaxing, she got the dog out of the bedroom, keeping her gaze away from both the bed and the crusted brown spot Riley's muzzle had left on the carpet. Poor thing, he could barely keep his head up. He swung it blindly into the wall once and yiked. After that, Linda held it for him as gently as she could, leading him downstairs to the kitchen. Her clothes were still on the floor there. She slipped on the sweatpants and jacket, not allowing herself to remember how she had flung them off or what she could have been thinking of. The dog panted heavily, and Linda paused only long enough to splash water on her face. She didn't need to leave a note. Her absence and Riley's would be clear enough. They were almost out the door before Mitch said, "Wait up." He looked terrible, his face swollen as if in sympathy with Riley's, his bloodshot eyes tinted pink. There had been some drinking the night before. Both he and Linda swung their gazes toward the dog at the same moment, and Mitch said, "Jesus, he looks like a pelican." They hadn't gotten all of the spines, the vet explained. A number of them had pierced the inside of Riley's mouth and broken off there. "You're lucky he didn't get them down his throat," he said, his tone indicating that nothing was lucky for a dog whose owners were careless enough to let him bite a porcupine. Barely even pausing to ask Mitch for permission, the vet gave Riley a sedative, then spun out of the room to tend other animals while the drug took hold. Linda and Mitch looked at the dog. "Who's a good boy? Who's a good, brave boy?" she cooed. "You've got to leave the funny-looking cats alone," Mitch said. The dog made a low moan, but already his eyes were drifting shut and his head jerked as it drooped toward the steel table. The vet had wanted to keep Riley overnight and give him general anesthesia, but Mitch said he's been through enough already. Linda agreed, but now that she and Mitch were alone in the tiny white-tiled room, Linda stared at the poster about canine dental health and tried to think of something ordinary to say. "You don't need to stay. You've already done more for him than I could ever have asked for. If you want to go, I'll take things from here," Mitch said. "Then how would you get home? Call a cab? Don't be silly. I've come this far. I want to see how the story comes out. Besides, I don't want to leave my boy." She stroked Riley's smooth ear. The silence that descended on them was choking. No small talk existed big enough to cover the wordlessness that separated Mitch and Linda. Thinking of the night before, she let herself think of running after Riley, calling his name, lugging him home. She thought of wrestling the quills out of his snout, like pulling long, barbed nails out of a protesting board. She remembered the bourbon, and then she stopped remembering. "This is a hell of a first date," Mitch said. "Look at him. He's really sleeping now. Poor thing, he probably needs to sleep for a week." "Maybe this time he'll learn his lesson," Mitch said. "Don't mess with what you don't know." Linda kept silent. It was a good lesson. The dog breathed heavily between them, long breaths that sometimes fluttered and whistled over his flews. "If you want, last night never happened," Mitch said eventually. "If you want, we never have seen each other." "That's a little extreme. We're friends, you and me and Riley." "Okay," Mitch said. She did not look at him, and she tried not to hear the line of sadness that sloped into his voice. "Friend? I like having him around. He makes my days better. I'm not ready to get my own dog yet, and it's good of you to let me steal Riley." "Think nothing of it," Mitch said. Linda's mouth had gotten into gear now, and she couldn't make it stop chattering. "A lot of people tell me to get a pet. People are full of suggestions for me. Accept every invitation, they say. Don't get inactive. Learn a new language. How do you think they would feel if I blasted into their lives with lectures about how they should live? As if they know what I need." "People are uneasy around you, and they feel awkward, so they say awkward things," Mitch said. "I know that. Shoot, I feel awkward around me. And that's why I like Riley. He likes one-word sentences. Sit. Okay. Come." "He doesn't like come," Mitch pointed out. "I'm in exactly the place nobody wants to be, and everybody is ready to tell me what to do," Linda said. "Nobody envies loneliness," Mitch said slowly, keeping his eyes on his dog. Linda watched Mitch's slow hand slip over the hard, sleek top of Riley's head over and over. You're right about that. I can only guess how much it must hurt to have Jack gone. But a lot of people think about being alone. They think about what they would do if they didn't have a house full of kids or their in-laws. You'd be surprised. A lot of people's fondest dreams feature an empty house and the ability to do anything they want. An empty house doesn't mean anything you want. It's all the same stuff, except there's nobody but you to do it. The dryer still needs to be unloaded. But you can unload it at 2 in the morning if you want to, Mitch said. I did that. I stood there in the middle of the night folding t-shirts. I started crying so hard that I got one of the t-shirts all wet and snotty and had to put it straight back into the wash. When Mitch didn't say anything, she added, I'm sorry. That's the real reason people don't want to talk to me. I keep doing TMIs. I don't mind. Another pause while Linda watched Mitch's hand pass softly over his dog's head. Riley's a good listener, too. He's used to hearing me talk, Mitch said. Is that what you do? Go around talking to Riley just so the house isn't silent all the time? Sometimes it's so quiet I feel like I'm going to choke. That's why I got a pet, and I accept every invitation, and I'm planning to learn French. It took Linda a moment to realize that Mitch was making a joke, though not much of one. Tell me if it works, she said. Oui, Mitch said, and then the vet came back, finished yanking the broken quills from Riley's mouth, and gave Mitch an antihistamine to give Riley for the next 3 days, antibiotics for the next 10. You two were lucky, the vet said. We were, Linda said. You won't see us in here again. Depends. You'll find out what kind of dog Riley is, the vet said. Some of them learn everything they need to know once they've had a mouthful of needles. Some keep thinking the story is going to have a different ending. I have clients like that, Mitch said. He's a social service worker. The three of them slid the sleepy dog off the examining table and settled him gently on his feet. He was able to stand and walk, but so groggy that he seemed to slip in his movements, as if his soft bag of skin contained unconnected bones. Linda exclaimed at his strength and composure, and Mitch reminded her that Riley liked to run through the soft dirt of other people's flower beds. They talked about Riley all the way to the car and all the way to the condo complex, where Linda overrode Mitch's protests and drove them directly to Mitch's front door. Thank you again, he said while she sat behind the wheel, the car's engine idling. We could never have gotten through all of this without you. He looked almost as bad as Riley, his t-shirt a mess of blood and dirt and fur, his arms crosshatched with scratches, his face unshaven just enough to look dirty. Linda touched her own hair, scraggling over her shoulder. I'm glad I could help. Really. After Riley's feeling better, let's get together for pizza. Sure, Mitch said, then pulled his dog into the condo with him. Linda wrapped her thigh with her fist. No matter what happened, she wanted something else to happen. Now she sat with the fully healed Riley on her kitchen floor, pushing to make him share his block of sunlight. Even in bright light, there was no sign of his battle with the porcupine, no interruption of the smooth layer of auburn fur over his mouth and jowls. If he was scarred, he probably didn't know it. Damned enviable dog, she thought, pressing her hand against his hot back. In a moment, she'd get up and drink another glass of water. Since Jack had died, she'd succeeded in losing the 5 pounds she'd tried for years to get rid of, and now she needed only 5 more to get back to her college weight. Water filled her up and kept her from getting dizzy, a point she discussed sometimes with Riley toward the end of their run when they were going at a trot. Now she stroked her thigh, hard as wood. She loved being able to touch her body and feel no give. Jack's had been like that. Maybe, since she couldn't have Jack anymore, she could be like Jack. Was that supposed to be a comfort? She could be fine for days at a time, and then something would trip her up. Vacuuming their bedroom one day, she had decided to vacuum the closets too, even underneath his suits where his shoes were lined up. She slipped her hands into his good black lace-ups and felt the contours of his feet, the weight of the shoes, smelled the heavy leather, and all at once he was dead all over again and grief stormed through her. She didn't know how long she stayed on the closet floor, but the sun was almost gone when she stood up and put the vacuum away. The next week, she hired a cleaning service, something she'd never done before. There was money now. Oh, hell, there'd been money all along. But she and Jack had played an elaborate game, putting on a show of their thrift and then surprising each other with extravagant gifts to prove they had been saving all along for each other. The year after Linda gave him a golf weekend at Shorecliffs, he gave her a diamond bracelet. They bought the condo instead of a 4-bedroom house with a bank of red and white geraniums foaming under the kitchen window, then had the dining room hung with wallpaper ordered from France that shipped flat and cost over $200 a panel. The whole point, the pleasure of the thing, came in surprising each other. They had been like tap dancing partners who seemed indifferent to each other but gradually revealed that they had been dancing all along to the same beat. Not that either of them could tap dance or dance at all. They met at a dinner dance fundraiser put on by Santa Rosita's Chamber of Commerce, both of them prowling around the edges of the party, not dancing. Jack had already launched Easy and Elegant, and Linda was working for a florist, the most practical use she could find for her art history degree. He lit up like a marquee when she told him. "A florist? Just who I need to meet. What's the best centerpiece for a business reception?" "Depends. What kind of signal do you want to send?" "This is a totally professional occasion and you're going to meet somebody wonderful tonight." "Orchids are pretty sexy, but they still look respectable." How does a flower get to be sexy? She could tell he liked this turn in the conversation. He leaned against the wall, his long legs stretched out. A big cat, she thought, a jaguar or a leopard, something that eats people. "It's a flower's job to look sexy," she said. "It's all about pollinating." "I'll never look at a daisy the same way again," he said. "Good, you shouldn't. And don't use daisies in your centerpieces. They're cheap, the floozies of the flower world." "We had a daisy in my high school class. Too bad her parents didn't name her Orchid," he said. Wouldn't teenage girls be afraid of a girl named Orchid?" "Afraid, but still helplessly drawn," he said, raising his eyebrows and laughing at her. She laughed back. She liked his flirting, which gave both of them plenty of room. He told her about Easy and Elegant, and she told him about impossible event planners who changed orders and gave the wrong dates and expected florists to arrive with squeegees. The music from the dance floor got louder, and Jack talked over it. Linda didn't, waiting to see how long he'd stall before moving a little closer. "There's got to be a bar here somewhere, doesn't there?" he half yelled when the DJ moved to "I want to dance with somebody." She lifted her hands, shrugged, and let him lead the way out of the ambitiously named ballroom at the Marriott. He walked like a cat, too, moving his long legs languorously and letting his sleepy eyes slide down her face and neck. After the racket of the party, the hushed conversations that flitted around the lobby had the sound of impropriety, even though they were probably no more scandalous than agreeing on meeting the next morning for breakfast. Jack was efficient at steering Linda into the furthest corner of the hotel bar, finding them in a place designed so that people could be seen, the sweet corner where people could discuss any kind of partnership. When Jack asked her what she'd like to drink, she said, "You tell me." He grinned. "I'll have a Maker's Mark on the rocks. She'll have a sidecar." He looked back at Linda. "How'd I do?" "Pretty well. The sidecar is the orchid of the drink world. From now on, I'll save them for after the party, when all the guests go home and the party givers take their shoes off, sit down, and nibble on leftover salmon." "How long do the party givers stay?" "They lock the doors and turn down the lights and stay as long as they want." Oh yes, she liked him. And he liked her. He waited 2 days before having an orchid sent to her at work at the address he'd gotten from her card. "Nice," her boss said. "Really a lovely one. If you keep it here, it can get all the humidity it needs." "Thanks," Linda said and took it home. She kept it in the humid bathroom where it stayed in bloom for 5 weeks. By then, she and Jack were seeing each other every weekend, texting jokes and pictures, dwelling in the dizzy midair between new romance and relationship. Linda wouldn't let her friends call Jack a boyfriend, and even to herself she wouldn't think lover, a word too laden with moony seriousness. Instead, she thought of Jack as Jack, a status she liked. He was her Jack. Spouses and partners welcome? Why, yes, she would bring her Jack. Arranging a pyramid of hideous, dependable chrysanthemums, she giggled. Most of her waking hours were filled with Jack, but she wasn't thinking about him in any way that could qualify as thought. So when he asked her one night whether she thought about him, she could honestly say no. He was filling her like smoke, seeping through her organs and between her blood cells, but she was not thinking about him. He looked startled, mildly annoyed. Why not? "Do you have any idea how many funerals fill up a typical week?" "Tell me." "Enough to make me sick of carnations." "Sick of carnations, sick of chrysanthemums. Want me to sweep you away from all of this?" "Yep," she said dreamily, still not exactly thinking, but she was listening very hard. I was thinking of Hawaii for a week. I'd love that, but I don't know if I can get the time off from work. That's why I thought we'd better get married first, he said. Good thinking. I like your style. She liked it even better when she tried to stand up a few minutes later and felt her knees give out like water. He caught her before she could hit the table. They knew how to talk to each other and they knew how to make each other laugh, but they didn't know each other's middle names or where they'd been born. When Linda's sister asked before the wedding whether Jack had brothers or sisters, Linda couldn't answer. She had only learned the night before that both his parents were alive, though long divorced. Are you sure this is a good idea? Her sister said. Women who marry convicts know more about their husbands than you do. We'll get caught up on the details. We know the important stuff, Linda said, thinking of the way Jack had rested a finger against the inside of her wrist while they were waiting in line to get a marriage certificate, and how the only thing she'd been able to think about was the warm pressure of that finger touching her pulse. They didn't talk about details because they didn't need to talk about details. They already agreed. Linda's favorite Sunday morning activity was going over the Times with Jack, looking at the ads. They took turns. SUV or convertible? Convertible. Lobster or chicken with truffles? Not that they ate lobster or drove convertibles, but they knew where they were aimed, and they planned to enjoy the journey. Despite her sister's reservations and her mother's all but stated distrust, Linda married Jack happily, went to Hawaii with him happily, and returned happily. They were happily married. Not everything needed to be known. If she asked him the name of the dog he'd had when he was 7, had she really learned anything necessary? When she lay in bed in the morning and listened, she knew exactly which cupboard he was searching for a bowl, and she knew how much coffee he was spooning into the grinder. She knew he would take the stairs in 4 bounds before he came to kiss her goodbye, and she knew he would call her on the way home to tell her about traffic and make a suggestion about dinner. There were lots of kinds of intimacy. Now she yearned to know the name of that long-ago dog. Hunger racked her for every childhood trip she hadn't heard about, every high school prize Jack had sought or won, every team he'd played on. She could look at a catalog and know in a glance what shirt Jack would have ordered, but she didn't know about the best Christmas he'd ever had, or the girl in 7th grade who'd broken his heart, or if he'd ever worn a cast over a shattered bone. Just saying. She'd thought there would be time to learn everything. She held off learning about him like a delicious prize that she would come to eventually. Now her memories of Jack, after 16 years of marriage, came down to his 42 regular coat and size 10 shoes. He liked gabardine. He did not like cream sauce. He loved her. He made sure she knew that, joking about his secretary Isabel and Christine, the short-lived temp at the office who brought a radio to play smooth jazz next to her computer. It was like walking through a strip club waiting room every time I passed her desk, Jack said. When Linda shared the story with her sister, she said, how does Jack know what a strip club sounds like? Christine and her radio were gone in 2 weeks. Isabel and her endless supply of stiletto pumps lasted year after year, warranting a deluxe fruit basket every Christmas and an ongoing joke between Linda and Jack that lasted the length of their marriage. Linda would imitate Isabel's long stares at Jack, the legs crossed and recrossed, while her straight, severe skirt crept up her thighs. You don't look yearning enough, Jack would say. Can you sigh huskily a few times? Oh, Jack, Linda would say, have you found the invoice? More than once, the joke had carried them to bed, and that was nice too. Linda was proud of how unthreatened she felt by Isabel, the woman who worked closely with Jack day after day and carried, poor thing, such a visible crush. Every once in a while, over the years, she had shown up with a new man on her arm, but he never lasted long. Linda and Jack did imitations of these escorts who looked terrified by Isabel's rock-hard hair and power suits. Soon enough, the new man would be gone and Isabel would retrain her gaze on Jack. When Linda came into the office to help out or just say hello, she made a point of being kind to Isabel. If the two women had been friends, Linda would have counseled Isabel to find another job and give herself a fresh start, but anyone could see that Isabel didn't want advice from Linda. Jack had been a kind of pivot between them, turning back and forth from his wife to his secretary, creating common ground. Now, though, the ground was gone, and Linda and Isabel were in midair. At the funeral reception, Isabel had found Linda standing for a moment by herself. Jack would have called this a 2-drink event, Isabel said. Linda walked away. She didn't have enough of Jack to share. When she told her sister about this encounter, her sister chided her. After disapproving of Jack for Linda's entire married life, she had now become the man's biggest fan. Linda called her sister every day to hear her sister say Jack's name over and over. You need to share these memories. This is exactly the time. The more that you send Jack out into the universe, the more powerfully Jack will come back to you. You need him now. We all need him. He isn't coming back, Linda said. He's dead. That's just energy, her sister said. Did I mention we were in California? Energy changes form, but it's never destroyed. Jack is still here, and you need to know that. I'm going to send you a link to a website you should look at. Don't bother, Linda said, but she could hear her sister's computer keys busily clicking, and when the link came through, she opened it. That was another thing about widowhood. Now she opened every idiotic, uplifting link that anybody sent her. This one involved a woman named Marie, something or other, wearing a black gown and a soulful expression, standing on a stage. When we feel we must clutch something most tightly is exactly the time we must give that thing away. Think of the thing you cherish most, the memory, the person, the time you were most happy and fulfilled, the time you were certain of happiness. Now think of how you might give that thing away. Who could you share it with? Who could you give it to? I'll bet you're thinking, Marie, you're crazy. Yes, Linda said. This is the way of the Spirit. We are called to do the hard thing, the impossible thing, the thing that seems most wrong. And in doing it, we will find freedom. You are out of your mind, Linda told her computer screen. For one mildly lunatic moment, she considered sending the thing to Mitch, the only person who would laugh at it. The man had his uses. For now, it was time to get his dog back home. Hey, you. Hey, sleepy time guy. Time to go home. She cooed at him for a good 5 minutes, knowing that her gentle tone wouldn't wake him up. That was why she used it. Only when her legs started to cramp from crouching beside him did she stroke his head until he opened his eyes, blinked, and nuzzled her hand. Then he shook his head, stood up, and looked hopefully at his leash. Greedy. We're going home now, big guy. Pocketing Mitch's key, she led Riley into the sunny morning, the air soft on her arms. Riley snuffled as they walked, investigating shrubs as if he'd never seen them before, and peeing meditatively on the rock that every dog in the complex peed on. Tipping her face to the sun, Linda felt the pleasure that followed a run, the ease in her body, her lightly trembling legs. Maybe she would skip going into the office today, skip even taking a shower, and just sit out in the sun. It was a nice idea. The key slid into Mitch's lock just as it always did, but the door stuck. Even when Linda put her shoulder to the wood and shoved, the door budged only a few inches. It had opened just fine an hour ago when she came to collect Riley. Linda pushed harder, and now Riley whined and jammed his snout into the opening. She heard the scrape of something over Mitch's tile floor, and then finally she was able to force the door far enough to look inside. Why had Mitch left a coffee table haphazardly in his foyer? He was supposed to be at work. A bedspread was wadded at the bottom of the stairs and the shades were all drawn. Riley trotted into the kitchen, then barked twice, hard. Linda ran. And found there a stout man in jeans and a t-shirt, a knife in one hand and blood on the other. "Are you all right?" she said. Stupid question. "You're Linda," he said. "Are you drunk? What are you doing here?" "Killing myself," he said, holding up the knife. "Stop, give me that." She reached for the knife, and he drew back from her with more grace than she had expected. Riley barked again, and the man looked at him and said, "Shut up." "That's Riley. He lives here." "I know who he is. I live here too." "You're Gary. Give the girl a prize." "Mitch would hate seeing you like this." She was edging around, trying to get closer to the knife, but Gary was onto her now and he kept a distance. Riley was growling, a sound she hadn't heard from him before. "Did you move the table in front of the door?" That was supposed to keep you from coming in. You're supposed to be out with Riley, and I'm supposed to be dead. Nothing is working out right." "Where's the liquor?" she said. He smiled, cunning. "What liquor?" "I can smell it and see it." He weaved so forcefully that he had to grab the counter for balance and his eyes couldn't focus. Maybe he'd botched his suicide because he couldn't find his wrist. "It's gone," he said. "I drank it." "Too bad. I would have joined you." "Why? Your ex-wife isn't on TV." "No," she said carefully, as if he was making sense. "Would you let me look at your wrist?" "I already heard about your nursing. I don't want to wind up at the vet hospital." She couldn't help it that all the males around her kept sticking themselves with sharp objects. "Would you at least let me run some water over your wrist?" "No." He lifted it and hacked at it again, the knife blade bouncing off the bone. Riley growled louder and leaned against Linda, his body a block between her and Gary. "Shit," he said, and began to cry without even covering his face, the tears running into his mouth. "Even the dog doesn't like me." "He feels threatened. He'll like you if you put down the knife." "Threatened? By me?" Gary took the knife and waved it in front of Riley, whose growl became a snarl. The dog's lip curled over his front teeth. "Don't," Linda said to one of them. Too late. Gary had already gone after Riley's face. Linda couldn't hear the clatter of the knife hitting the tile floor over the barking of the dog and the screaming of the man, and then Gary was down with Riley cowering and making strange yodeling sounds. Gary was bleeding now. Blood gushed from the hand that had held the knife, and Riley had jumped onto Linda, whining and pawing at her as if he meant to crawl up into her arms. On the floor, Gary was cradling his hand and crying. The next part was instinct. She pushed the dog down and grabbed a dish towel from the counter, then crouched next to Gary while Riley yodeled and pawed at her. Feebly, for a moment, Gary tried to push her away, but she held the gushing hand and wrapped the towel around it. "You're going to the hospital." "No, I'm killing myself." "You wish. You're going to have a good scar, though." Riley broke into a soul-wrenching howl, and Linda glanced back at him and snarled, "Hush!" No difference. "He doesn't listen," Gary said. "You terrified him, and you trashed Mitch's place, and we're getting you to the hospital." "Let me die," he cried, rocking his head back piteously. "Oh, for Christ's sake, stand up." She peeled back the soaked dish towel to see blood bubbling out of the slash across the center of Gary's palm. "I should leave you here. It would serve you right. Leave you here with Riley." "He doesn't listen," Gary said again. The dog whined and pressed against Linda, and for a moment Linda imagined dropping Gary, picking up Riley's leash, and heading out the front door. "Come on, stand up. Let's get you started." "No," Gary said, but he was letting her pull him to his feet. Riley stopped whining, and the kitchen, even the part now slick with Gary's blood, felt calm for a moment. "Walk with me," Linda said. "Are you feeling wobbly? Lean on me. I won't touch your hand. We'll just go to my place." It would be better to leave him here while she ran for her car, but she didn't trust Gary by himself, even if she took every knife in the kitchen. The man's eyes were glassy as a doll's, and his lips kept silently moving, as if he were dribbling out crumbs of words. Going slowly, cajoling and encouraging Gary, Linda got him out the front door and shuffled with him down the quiet street. From behind the door, Riley whined disconsolately. Gary's dish towel was completely soaked now, leaving dots of blood on the sidewalk. "Mitch won't like this," he said. His words buzzed, either from the alcohol or blood loss. "No kidding." "He likes you," Gary said. "I know." "Men like women, but women don't like men." "Keep walking, Gary. You're doing fine." "You want things. Men don't want things." "Ha," she said. "Don't stop." "I have to pee," he said. "You can't pee here. We're on a street. You'll get arrested." "I have to pee," he yelled, jerking at his zipper with his uncut hand and flinging blood on Linda while he struggled to pull out his soft, fat penis. Linda clamped her hand on it. "Damn it, wait," she said, moving her hand off him fast, but not so fast that she didn't feel the stirring. "Pinch it. We're almost at my place and you can pee there." Yep. This is why you come to a writers' conference. She could talk as much as she wanted. She already knew from Gary's side that he was pissing his pants. Within a moment, the smell caught up with them. "You're going to be a big hit at the ER," she said. I never asked to go there. I was fine." "You're bleeding like a stuck pig. Watch that step." He managed the step with such elaborate blooping care that he was breathing a little hard. "So I'm bleeding. So what?" "So I had to get you out of there. People don't let other people bleed all over somebody's kitchen." "He's not somebody. He's Mitch." Gary paused, wobbling, and Linda pulled his arm, though she didn't want to touch him. She couldn't afford to let him stop. "I know who he is, okay?" she said. "Look, we're almost at my place." "He likes you, but you don't like him." Another stop, another tug, harder this time. "My husband died 3 months ago," she said. "I don't like anybody right now." "You think that's the worst thing." "Ha," he said. "It's not a picnic." "It's great." He stumbled over air, and he would have fallen if she hadn't grabbed him on the wrist just above his cut. "Ow!" "Just trying to keep you upright, soldier." "You hurt me. Maybe that's why your husband died." "He had an aneurysm." She heard the fury behind her words, and it embarrassed her. The man was out of his mind drunk and maybe crazy on top of it, but he still had no right. An explosion in the brain. "That's what I want," Mitch said. Mitch held up his hand, a sodden red paw. "This isn't good enough." It's what you got. Here's the car. Let's get you settled in. He smiled at her, a horrible expression full of cunning. You grabbed my dick. I was trying to prevent a misdemeanor. I'll tell Mitch. I don't care. She hoped he was too drunk to discern the flare of heat in her voice and wondered if he was telling the truth about having an ex-wife. How had any woman consented to marry him? Maybe he was different when he was sober. Maybe he'd been handsome and charming when he was young. Maybe he knew how to fly. You should care, Gary said. He's a good man. He kept repeating, good man, while Linda shoved him into the car, trying not to gag. She didn't bother with the seatbelt, even though the car's warning ding was maddening. Gary's muttering kept up while she backed up onto Rancho Pacifica and beelined for the hospital. She would have to keep the car's window open for a month to get Gary's smell out. For herself, she hadn't even showered yet. It would be noon before she made it to the office, where she would get the look from Isabel that said she knew Linda had spent the morning getting her nails done and eating strawberries. At the yellow light at Hudson, she gunned it. You're going to kill us, Gary said companionably. You're hurt. I'm trying to help you. You grabbed my dick. His face fogged up. I didn't think any woman would do that again. How long have you been divorced, she said. 6 years. And you haven't been with a woman in all that time? He looked at her cagely. Mitch doesn't have to know what we do, he said. Oh, yes, he does, she said, fast. Mitch has to know everything. He's a good man. He's an asshole. All my friends are assholes. My wife left me for my asshole best friend. 6 years ago, Linda said. I've only gotten better, he said. Linda couldn't keep her eyes from sliding over to him. Soaked pants, hand wrapped in a dirty, bloody towel, lank hair that hung in strings over little confused eyes. His fly still gaped open. The stinging smell of urine undercut with booze came off of him like a force field. She couldn't help herself. She started laughing. The seatbelt kept Gary's, the seatbelt that he hadn't put on in the last page. That's what happens. The new work thing, Tony? Yeah. Kept Gary's intended punch from hitting her, but she couldn't keep him from yelling. Bitch! Son of a bitch! Whore bitch! You think you're that special? You think everybody wants what you've got? Your husband died to get away from you. The red light was the next thing that happened. Linda had to step on the brakes hard. She didn't have to tell Gary to get the hell out of her car, but it was satisfying to do that, and to undo his seatbelt, and to yank open his door, and to push him with all of her strength, and to watch him stumble into traffic in her rearview mirror while she drove away. Thank you.